Hi again.
We're back.
We'll try and keep to the point.
Try.
Okay, so this third one, if you're looking in your booklets and you need to add more notes, it's the third one, the third scene where it's the interview with Aileen. So not the final scene, the interview with Aileen where Nick Broomfield drops the camera and asks her, was it in self-defence? You want to kick off that?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. This one. I mean, Charlie mentioned it in the video just gone about this idea of ethics. And there is a question there, isn't there, in terms of this central column about what sort of created the response. First of all, well, the camera's placed at such an angle that you kind of see sort of part of him.
Yes.
Sort of dipping in and out.
He still managed that.
He still managed that. So he's very keen on the participatory kind of level, isn't he? Which is again the mode that we agreed that this is part of as a documentary. And we still know that she's behind the screen because we see very small amounts, but I think we see like shadow and we see bits and pieces. But we certainly hear her, and they're both kind of whispering, aren't they? Trying to sort of keep things down a little bit at points. But it raises that question about whether this is actually extracting information so that it will help her in some way, or is this the documentary maker, kind of helping himself in terms of, getting to a point where he's getting the scoop, on this. And for the spectator, which he has,
it is the scoop.
Exactly. And it's quite interesting. So those of you who heard, I mean, he's a documentary maker. He's not. I'm just thinking of parallels recently, like yesterday, talking about the fake shake, for example, and the Chilisa trial and things like that. That there's elements of entrapment, isn't there here as well? Because although he might be doing it for the right reasons, saying it was in self-defence, wasn't it, and all this, he's still essentially telling her there's no filming taking place. There's and yet he's doing it secretly. So. It's a really difficult one to kind of morally struggle with, I think.
Yeah, especially when he's, you get this, he talks about his relationship with Aileen and how he feels about her and how she was, the only victim in the case, basically. So there's an element of he's breaking her trust in a way. So there is an element of that. But then it's looking at, there is one reason for it, that it could be, his name as a documentary filmmaker increases. Views of the film increases, or is it just that he thinks that the information should be out there, that she did do it in self-defence because she's just gone through a whole rant saying it wasn't, and that his focus of the documentary is to paint her as the victim. So does it just support that focus that he had? And that's the debate basically for that. Yeah,
definitely. I think also as the narrative goes on, what you increasingly see is he tries to show her as being unfit, doesn't he, to be executed as well. And that's interesting because he paints that picture clearly of sympathy throughout, and then as it progresses in the narrative, you do feel, I think, more and more that it's becoming a case of that he's trying to almost influence the case and influence the decision from Jeb Bush and others, and to say actually this woman is not fit to to stand execution, and of course she's very objectionable to that, and that's when she ends up flicking him the bird, doesn't she, later on, and shouting at him. I think that's probably the last sequence actually that I'm now starting to encroach on, so I'll pause.
Back away.
Yep.
Okay.
Resist.
But before he drops the camera, we were looking at, I think this is when some in our room started to be a bit turned off in terms of Nick Broomfield, so starting to have that oppositional reading. In terms of his questioning is so emotive. It's not trying to get to facts or anything like that. So he's asking questions like, do you have any friends in here? What's your day like? When, the answer to that is never going to be good from someone on death row. So it's things like that, it's very obvious what he's trying to do. And I think that for some of you, that was a turn off that I guess it's kind of, as a viewer, you would have preferred more kind of to be able to come to the decision by yourself, really. Yeah.
That sometimes is the criticism, isn't it, of documentaries? They and also of fiction films actually. Increasingly, Hollywood movies. I'm going to make the distinction. A movie. I know people just think it's terminology in terms of one being American, one being British European. But there's a big difference between movies and films, aren't there? Movies tend to be much more kind of, dare I say it, kind of bit sort of slush in terms of
dumbing down.
They're dumbing down and they're a bit dross-like, you know. And so what they do is they hold your hand almost through the narrative and give you the key signifiers and all of that.
Yeah.
Whereas a film, you have to work hard. You have to work hard to work out what the hell's going on. And sometimes you're a bit like, you know, really confused.
Yeah.
And interestingly, documentaries, you always classify them as films, of course. But sometimes throughout this particular documentary, I must admit, I agree with you. I think there's that element where you just think, I'm really being sold something here now.
Yeah.
And I agree. It's like I would like to be able to make the decision myself, but the facts, if they're facts, are kind of, or everything's being laid so thick and fast that now I'm being controlled in terms of what I think.
Yeah.
And so you're right. I think from that there are oppositional readings from those that are resisting, you know, Broomfield's kind of tactics.
So the purpose in terms of perhaps other kind of responses that kind of came out of this scene was sympathy and the uneasy feeling. We talked about the claustrophobic kind of feel of the shot itself in terms of, you know, Aileen being so up close, but her dialogue coming out of that and her doing things like we put combing her hair, laughing hysterically, while talking about these terrible times in her life, really gives that feel of she is insane, she's mentally unstable, and he wants to make that very clear, obviously, before the next scene of him asking was it in self-defense.
And at that point you become the ultimate voyeur, don't you, because you just feel, you know, as a spectator, you kind of you feel bad because you're looking at someone who clearly is, like you say, is clearly unwell, and it becomes an even more difficult kind of picture to kind of look at, really.
Yeah, that adds to the uncomfortableness of watching this, doesn't it?
It does. And we were talking about a technique that horror films often use, and that is those long edits where you know, someone's being attacked, murdered, whatever in a horror film. And it's gruesome, and it's always that one where, you know, you hide behind hands and you look away, but your brain always says, oh, look back, but you always look back too soon, and it's still on screen, and the director's playing with you. And we said it was kind of similar in the documentary because you almost wanted that to end, you wanted it to kind of finish and stop, but Broomfield keeps going and keeps almost punishing the audience, the spectator, with this over and over, and you're like, I get it now, I get it.
And then we return again to her. So it does, you know, and each time we do see her, you can see the deterioration, can't you? So it is visibly worse. And it does feel like, you know, like you say, it's the voyeur kind of aspect.
Yeah.
And it's funny that as much as some of you were saying you don't like the kind of spoon feeding of Nick Broomfield, some of you were saying, therefore I don't really care about her, I think she's guilty, and guilty as the rest of them. And then some of you were sitting on the fence about that, saying, you know, that you do have sympathy because you can see that she's clearly insane, regardless of what Nick Broomfield is pushing. So there's real mixed readings there. But then somebody said to me as well, I really like her. And I thought that was really kind of quite sweet, really. That, you know, I think I do. I think I really like her. That I just, you know, I don't want to give my opinion too much of it though.
I know what you mean. It's hard, isn't it? It's hard, but from that spectator angle, you do. We all have different readings of it, and like you say, different feelings relating to the character, to the documentary maker, to the film, you know, as a whole process. But yeah, that is interesting. Should we mention something about the little sort of connection to fiction film as well?
Yes.
Because you mentioned, which I think was a really good point, I'm going to reiterate it to my group, about the narrative in terms of characters. You know, the fact that they are villains compared to her. You know, there's this real simple, kind of straightforward juxtaposition between her as kind of not hero, but her as kind of being she's been wrong done to, but and then they are the villains. Victim is a good word, so sums it up quite nicely. So yeah, victim and villains, and you know it's throughout, isn't it? Throughout that linear kind of you know narrative that's happened all her life, and I think that's why, at the same time as you're kind of thinking she is clearly insane, that's why you kind of, we audiences warm to her, because there's that element of she's always been the underdog, she's always been fighting just for any normal sense of justice, it seems.
And that she does say herself that if she lived another life, that she would be an upstanding citizen and things like that, which, you know, really adds to that idea of, you know, she's just not had many breaks in life, really.
No.
In terms of another kind of narrative kind of factor, though, was that we felt it was kind of similar to fiction in that it had that narrative twist.
Yes.
That it was kind of like a big reveal that he did this interview.
Yeah.
And that it's similar to, like, in horror when you have privileged spectator position that
yeah.
you know more than the characters.
Yeah.
And that there is that sense again of that voyeurism kind of feel. And engagement is created through that, obviously, in terms of being put in that position as a viewer. So yeah, those are the key kind of...
Yeah, some of those key things, aren't there, that come through from it. And again, I think she, you know, it is an interesting one, because the way that it kind of works, I suppose, and the way it's kind of heading, you get a reveal, but there is the disappointment that you kind of know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
And it is predictable. And you do get that as a similarity with fiction. When you get a fiction film that is predictable, you do turn off. And I have to say, there were points in the film where I felt, you know, I don't physically mean turn it off, but I mean you do sort of almost withdraw from it a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because some of it is absolutely fascinating and kind of, you know, you're drawn completely into it. But then at other points you just think, oh, kind of, I know what's happening, so there's no more to kind of encourage me. I don't know.
Yeah. So we kind of know from the off that she's killed in the end, don't we? So he doesn't. So it's a reveal in a sense, but yeah, you're right. So it just adds to that sense of sadness, doesn't it?
It does.
You know, as it now progresses from this point, it just becomes a real sad kind of tale, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so yeah, you're right. It adds to that, rather than perhaps maybe it could have, you know, why did he structure it in that way when he could have left that bit out in terms of, you know, she wasn't. All right, she was high profile in America, but she wasn't that high profile in, you know, Britain, where he's from, and that maybe people wouldn't have known that she'd died, that she was executed. So there could have been another, which would have made it more dramatic. But I guess that's what he wasn't trying to do.
No, I suppose that's it.
Going for the drama as such.
No,
that kind of genre style of it.
Yeah. Very interesting. I know we'll leave this for the next video, but very interesting. Just as a little snippet here, I think very interesting how he then is interviewed by the media.
Yes.
At the end, because obviously he's the one that has the last contact, and that conversation he has with the media is really interesting, I think. But we won't go into any detail now. But I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah, there's a hook right there. Okay.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Oh dear.